because we'd never before known or imagined even that simple hunter-gatherers could produce such spectacular monumental structures.
Beneath the massive stone circles of Göbekli Tepe, a sealed chamber had waited for over 10,000 years. But now, researchers have finally seen what was locked away. The first step into that crypt felt like stepping back in time. In there, archaeologists stared in shock as a sacred world revealed itself, a place no human had seen since prehistory. The carvings, the shapes, the silence, they screamed secrets that could shatter everything we thought we knew about our past. Join us as we explore the secrets hidden inside this structure by one of the earliest generations of humans, inside the world's first temple. Long ago, almost 12,000 years back, a strange giant stone complex was built on a hill in what is now southeastern Turkey. This place is called Göbekli Tepe. People built huge pillars of stone in circles, even though at the time humans lived as hunter-gatherers. They didn't farm yet, and they didn't live in big towns. Yet they somehow managed to carve and move heavy stones and raise them into massive monuments on top of a hill. This surprising fact makes Göbekli Tepe stand out because it shows that even before farming, people already had enough organization, planning, and belief to build something grand like this. Göbekli Tepe sits on a limestone plateau, about 15 kilometers northeast of the modern city of Şanlıurfa. On that plateau, ancient builders erected distinctive T-shaped stone pillars. Some of these pillars rise as tall as 5.5 meters. Around each circle of pillars were walls or benches, forming what archaeologists call enclosures. On some of the broad surfaces of these pillars, the builders carved images, wild animals or abstract shapes, perhaps symbols. Because of these carvings and their arrangement, Göbekli Tepe feels less like a village and more like a place built for special gatherings, rituals, or ceremonies. For a long time, archaeologists believed that large buildings and temples came only after humans started farming, settled down, lived in villages, and had time to invest in big monuments. But Göbekli Tepe changes that view completely. This site was erected by people who moved around, hunted animals, or gathered plants, but did not farm or raise animals. The massive stones, complex design, careful carving, all these required a big shared effort. Many people working together, coordination, planning. That means even without agriculture, these early people had social organization strong enough to build great monuments. That flips our usual story of how civilization began. And because of that, many scholars now think Göbekli Tepe might be the world's first known temple or ritual center, earlier than any other big religious or ceremonial building we know. The enclosures and carved pillars possibly served as places for ceremonies, rituals, or feasting when people gathered from different groups. Some experts suggest the site was a pilgrimage center, a place where people came together for shared beliefs, traditions, and maybe to honor ancestors or spirits. Another astonishing fact, while the monumental enclosures are huge and impressive, the site surprises by what it does not show. Archaeologists found no signs of ordinary houses, hearths, or trash pits typical for permanent settlements of that era. There is no clear evidence that the builders lived there permanently. Instead, the site seems to have been used only occasionally, perhaps when people came together. Yet despite that, they carried out massive stoneworking, transport, organization, and carving, all signs that these forager groups were more complex than what we used to think. Göbekli Tepe matters a great deal for understanding human history. It pushes back the timing of sophisticated human architecture and symbolic thinking by thousands of years. It shows that long before farming, before cities, even before pottery, humans could build, plan, carve, and create. It proves that spirituality, belief, community, and shared effort might have come first, even before settled agriculture. That means our picture of how civilization began might need rewriting. First came belief and ritual, then came farming and settlement. Göbekli Tepe may be one of the earliest chapters of human civilization. Moreover, the artistry and technique at Göbekli Tepe are impressive. The builders shaped massive limestone pillars by hand with simple tools, then moved them and arranged them in ordered patterns. Some researchers found that the layout of enclosures might follow geometric rules, perhaps triangles or other shapes, showing early human understanding of geometry and planning. That kind of architectural sophistication, without modern tools, without metal, without advanced technology, speaks loud about the skill, creativity, and cooperation of early humans. Today, Göbekli Tepe stands as a remarkable proof of human ingenuity and belief. It draws researchers, historians, and curious minds from all over the world. It challenges old ideas about when and how humans changed from small wandering bands into organized societies. It invites us to rethink. Maybe humans became spiritual and social before they became farmers. Perhaps belief brought people together first, and only later did agriculture, villages, and civilization follow. This place is a bridge to our distant past, a time when humans dared to build, dream, and reach for meaning, long before history was written. The mysteries of Göbekli Tepe. Archaeologists working at Göbekli Tepe recently carried out deep studies and careful excavations that brought forward discoveries changing how the site is understood. They moved through the layered soil and brushed away old dust to bring out hidden details that had remained sealed for thousands of years. As they worked across the monumental enclosures, they laid out new paths for research and pushed forward new ways of thinking about early human life. Their efforts brought the world's focus back to this ancient hill, where stones, carvings, and buried walls continue to show how complex early societies might have been. During these activities, researchers came across something they had not expected. They uncovered a life-size human statue placed horizontally inside a wall between two key structures known as Enclosure B and Enclosure D. The workers carefully brushed away layers of soil to bring out the face, torso, and upper body carved in stone, still lying in its original position. This find pushed open a new understanding of how humans used imagery at this place. Until recently, Göbekli Tepe had been known mainly for its pillars carved with animals and symbols, but this single human figure brought out another side of the site's long story. Experts studying the placement of the figure noted that it was not left behind by chance. They explained that it had been set inside the wall deliberately, forming part of the building's design. This suggested that those who built the structure might have used the statue as an offering or object of ritual meaning. The figure lay within the stones as if meant to stay there forever, becoming part of the life of the enclosure. This shifted attention toward the ways early builders fitted human images into their symbolic architecture. It also pushed researchers to go back over earlier structures to recheck buried walls for similar features. Alongside this surprising statue, another development began to change the picture of life around Göbekli Tepe. Teams working around the slopes and outer areas carried out surveys using ground-based scanning tools. These tools picked up long, straight outlines beneath the soil, showing that rectangular buildings once stood around the monumental circles. These outlines did not look like the round ritual enclosures. Instead, they looked more like structures used in daily living, pushing researchers to rethink the idea that life around the hill was limited only to ritual gatherings. They moved through the mapped traces and marked out possible building lines that could belong to long-lost domestic areas. These rectangular traces pointed toward a wider settlement pattern around the monumental enclosures. The findings brought out the possibility that people did not only visit Göbekli Tepe for ceremonies, they might have lived nearby or stayed for long periods while taking part in ritual events. The traces revealed outlines that looked like rooms and boundaries of simple buildings, suggesting that daily life, work, and ritual activity might have taken place side by side. Researchers continued to collect soil samples, record architectural pieces, and walk the exposed areas of the site. They worked to find out how the rectangular traces were arranged along the slopes and how people of that time might have organized their settlement. As they dug through the soil, they brought out small fragments of stone debris and shaping tools that may have come from daily craft activities. These fragments gave more weight to the idea that life around Göbekli Tepe may have included tasks like tool making, food preparation, and the shaping of stone used in architecture. While these discoveries were shaping the landscape of research, teams working inside Enclosure C carried out reinforcement work to bring up fallen stones and stabilize damaged areas. These activities allowed researchers to examine older layers and walk through spaces that had not been accessible before. As they cleared out collapsed stones, They brought out more details of the enclosure's shapes and building phases. This closer access allowed them to examine how builders of the period lifted large pillars, shaped wall segments, and arranged the spaces. Research around the human statue continued as teams documented the carving in detail. They took measurements, recorded surface marks, and studied how the statue was set into the wall. The surface bore marks. The torso and arms were carved in realistic proportions, and the head faced outward as if meant to watch over the enclosure. This careful positioning brought out the idea that the figure formed part of a larger symbolic plan. The surrounding stone showed no signs of collapse or accident, further supporting the idea of a deliberate design choice. As archaeologists moved through the site, they also used radar tools to bring out deeper features not visible on the surface. These tools revealed more underground shapes that could represent earlier walls or unexcavated enclosures. The shapes appeared beneath layers of buried soil, hinting at structures that had not yet been exposed. This created more interest in the wider environment around Göbekli Tepe, as researchers now had a clearer map of where to carry out future digs. The information brought out the idea that the site might be far larger than what has already been uncovered. These recent findings brought together the ritual, symbolic, and everyday sides of early human life. The work helped develop a deeper understanding of how the people at Göbekli Tepe constructed their ritual areas, combining heavy stonework with artistic carvings. The rectangular traces suggested daily living areas, while careful recording of Enclosure C offered new insight into how builders created large ritual spaces. Together, these discoveries pushed researchers to expand the story of Göbekli Tepe into one that shaped the landscape over long periods. The hidden chamber discovery. For a long time, the team kept working around the ancient site as they tried to dig through each layer and figure out what still lay hidden under the ground. The work went on day after day as they cleared out trenches, brushed off stones, and marked out sections that stretched across the old landscape. Nothing unusual came up at first, and the site moved forward in its usual slow rhythm while the archaeologists pushed through the hardened soil. Then the ground began to show strange signs, and the surface started to shift in patterns that stood out from everything else around it. The soil dipped in some areas and rose in others, pulling the team in and making them lay out new lines to track the changes. They followed the markings across the earth and worked out that something bigger waited below, something that had stayed covered through countless centuries. The more they worked through the compacted soil, the more the shape under the ground began to stand out. The team kept bringing in equipment to help them cut through the layers without breaking anything, and each layer peeled back like part of an old buried memory. What first looked like another simple space slowly turned into a deeper structure that pushed the team to slow down and watch every inch they uncovered. The sealed chamber held its position under the weight of time, untouched by anyone who passed through the region before. The workers cleared out the soil around the entrance and moved aside the hardened dust that had built up around the edges. With every careful sweep, the shape of the chamber grew clearer, and the sense of stepping toward something ancient grew stronger around the entire team. The air around the site grew heavier as the team tried to figure out how to cut through the next layer without letting anything collapse or break apart. The soil around them shifted every now and then as the tools scraped the surface, and small clouds of dust rose into the air. The workers kept pushing through, brushing off stones, checking the edges, and pulling the loose soil away from the opening. Every movement mattered because the chamber had survived thousands of years without anyone touching it, and the wrong action could make parts of it fall apart. The team set up lines, lights, and supports as they moved down into the deeper section, making sure they were not putting pressure on the older stones. The atmosphere tightened around them as they pushed toward the gate of the sealed room, knowing they were closing in on one of the rarest spaces ever found at the site. More experts were called in when the news began to reach other places, and they stepped into the area with scanners, drones, notebooks, and tools built for delicate work. The workers made space for them and set up separate paths as people moved around the site. The land around Göbekli Tepe soon filled with activity as more specialists arrived from different parts of the world. The nearby community gathered outside the marked zone, watching the rising energy around the discovery while journalists set up tents and lights. As the days went on, the pressure around the site kept building as the chamber neared its first opening after many millennia. The team stayed consistent through the noise and movement around them, sticking to their work as they cleared out the last layers and prepared the space for the first look inside. When the final layer of soil was brushed aside and the chamber opened up for the first time, the space inside revealed itself slowly under the lights. The room stretched out in a cold stillness that had held its place since the early ages of human life. Every stone sat exactly where the builders had placed it, and every shadow inside showed the way the structure had been shaped long ago. The workers stepped through the entrance with extreme care, letting the air settle around them as they checked the walls and edges. Inside, the space carried a strange feeling, as if time had paused inside the chamber and waited for someone to walk in again. Even the most experienced members of the team paused as they moved across the floor, taking in the details of a room that had stayed sealed through ages and natural changes outside. Then the workers quickly spread out their equipment across the chamber, setting up scanners, cameras, and other tools to record every corner before touching anything inside. Laser lines moved across the walls to pull out the shapes carved into the stones, while 3D cameras mapped the ceiling and the floor. Dust samples were gathered from the edges to figure out how the space had stayed sealed and protected for so long. As the team brushed off the surfaces slowly, shapes began to rise out of the shadows, and carvings started to show themselves in faint patterns. Every inch of the chamber seemed carefully arranged, as if everything had been put in place with purpose. Images from the inside began to emerge as the team worked through the space, and people everywhere reacted to the details coming from one of the oldest ceremonial sites known to human history. A belief frozen in time, the chamber revealed itself slowly, and the moment the team stepped inside, everyone understood they were seeing something truly extraordinary. It wasn't simply a hidden room beneath one of the world's oldest temple sites. The space had been locked away for thousands of years, perfectly preserved, without losing its shape or meaning. The first thing that struck the archaeologists was the sheer size of the room. They had expected a small storage area or a minor crypt, but the chamber stretched wider and taller than anyone had imagined. Its walls rose with care, carved and arranged in ways that clearly showed planning, intention, and deliberate design. Every corner seemed to tell a story, every shadow seemed to hold significance, and every stone felt like it had been placed intentionally. The team moved through the space slowly, brushing off dust and letting the light fall across shapes frozen for millennia. As they moved further into the chamber, the carvings on the walls began to take form. Animals appeared almost everywhere, twisting and crouching along the stones. Serpents slithered across surfaces, foxes crouched in corners, boars and birds appeared in sequences that suggested storytelling. Each engraving seemed placed to catch attention, as if meant to guide the eyes of anyone walking through. Geometric patterns ran along the edges, forming lines and shapes that hinted at ritual or symbolic use. The team bent down to trace each line with their hands and cameras, trying to work out whether the carvings represented maps, star charts, or stories passed down across generations. Some patterns were layered, showing repeated attention over time, as if each generation added its mark without erasing the previous. The interplay of old and new hinted at a society that honored tradition while adapting to change. Objects inside the chamber were arranged carefully, clearly following a plan. Polished stone tools, bowls, and figurines weren't scattered randomly. They were laid out in ways that suggested ceremonial use. Some figurines depicted humans with exaggerated features, while others showed animals that might have carried symbolic meaning. Each item seemed chosen for its material, shape, and significance. The level of craftsmanship surprised everyone, far beyond what might be expected from a hunter-gatherer society. These weren't simply objects or decorations. They were carriers of meaning, perhaps even of knowledge, encoded in their form. The team moved slowly, brushing away layers of dust to expose surfaces that had remained untouched for thousands of years, letting each discovery sink in as they traced the purpose behind every placement. Among the most striking elements were smaller stone pillars, shaped like the massive T-shaped monoliths outside the chamber. These miniatures were carved with intricate reliefs that mirrored patterns found across the larger site. The archaeologists examined them carefully, considering whether they had been used for teaching rituals, symbolic practice, or private ceremonies. Whatever their purpose, The objects showed a deep understanding of architecture, symbolism, and social organization. Carved niches and wall depressions also appeared throughout the chamber. Many seemed designed to hold objects that were no longer present, leading the team to speculate about perishable items, such as offerings, ritual tools, or sacred objects. The niches weren't placed anyhow. Their position suggested alignment with celestial events, seasonal cycles, or ceremonial routines. Each indentation seemed intentional, part of a larger plan connecting space, time, and human activity. As they continued exploring, dust and residue analysis revealed traces of pigments on walls and artifacts. Red, ochre, and black colors hinted that the chamber had once been brightly decorated. The combination of carvings, pigments, and carefully arranged artifacts suggested that the society who built this place thought deeply about ceremony, symbolism, and perhaps moral or spiritual narratives. The chamber wasn't simply a room. It functioned like a stage, guiding visitors through experiences, rituals, or teachings designed to provoke reflection and understanding. The team moved from one corner to another, scanning surfaces, brushing off dirt, and photographing the shapes. Each step revealed more detail, showing how every choice reflected knowledge, intention, and purpose. Advanced scanning and imaging technologies added another layer to the understanding of the space. 3D scans revealed that certain carvings and artifacts aligned with sunlight entering the chamber at specific times of the year, such as solstices and equinoxes. At those moments, the light illuminated particular carvings or objects placed in the niches. This suggested that the builders had an advanced understanding of astronomy and the passage of time, integrating celestial events into the design of their sacred architecture. For hunter-gatherers without written calendars, this knowledge would have been valuable for both practical and spiritual purposes. Walking through the chamber, the team could sense that a story ran through the space, a narrative connecting carvings, pillars, and objects. It might have recorded creation myths, seasonal cycles, or lessons in morality, life, death, and rebirth. Every shadow, every object, every carving seemed deliberately placed to guide attention, provoke thought, and create meaning. Animal symbolism repeated throughout reinforced possible spiritual or societal meanings. But unlike many archaeological sites where objects are scattered or eroded, everything in the chamber has survived intact. The sealed room offered a rare glimpse into not just artifacts, but also the intentions, beliefs, and cognitive abilities of its builders. By staying untouched for thousands of years, the space preserved a snapshot of human thought, ritual, and culture from an era before written history. Moving through the chamber, archaeologists felt as though they were stepping into a dialogue across 10 millennia, encountering a society with artistic skill, architectural knowledge, symbolic thinking, and awareness of celestial patterns. Every corner raised questions, every object demanded attention, and every detail hinted at a civilization whose sophistication continues to astonish. The genius of prehistoric builders. At first, it seemed impossible to imagine that hunter-gatherers could build something like Göbekli Tepe. The usual idea has always been that advanced buildings, large monuments, and meaningful art only appear after people settle down to farm. Yet here is a site from around 9,600 BCE, made by people who had not yet invented farming as we know it. This fact alone turns our assumptions upside down. It forces us to rethink what primitive really means. These people were far from unskilled wanderers. They organized themselves, thought carefully, and worked over long periods, possibly across generations, to create structures meant to last thousands of years. Archaeologists have gathered clues about their society, but much remains a mystery. They probably moved in small groups, following seasonal patterns, gathering plants, hunting animals, and adjusting their lives to nature's rhythms. Despite their mobility, these people could plan and carry out massive building projects. They quarried and shaped enormous T-shaped pillars, transported them across distances, and set them into circular enclosures. The level of cooperation needed to do all this is staggering, especially without wheeled carts or draft animals. Every move would have had to be carefully organized. The work suggests social structures far more complex than typically assumed for hunter-gatherers. People must have taken on leadership roles, coordinated labor, and agreed on shared goals. Even the smallest mistake in moving the massive stones could have caused collapse. Yet they managed it, showing ingenuity, planning, and a vision that reached beyond their daily survival. Art and symbolism were central to their culture. Every pillar, both inside and outside the newly discovered chamber, is carved with animals, shapes, and abstract designs that likely carry significance deeper than decoration. Boars, foxes, snakes, and other animals appear repeatedly. Though these animals were part of daily life, their depiction seems symbolic, perhaps spiritual. The carvings do not simply reflect reality, they interpret it. Some researchers suggest they represent myths, ancestral stories, or even observations of the stars. The patterns are carefully thought out, layered, and connected. Each generation seems to have added to the work without erasing what came before. The team pieced together these clues, moving carefully, tracing the carvings, and studying how they fit together in the larger cultural picture. The hidden chamber fits within this cultural and symbolic landscape. Its precise design, symbolic carvings, and placement under the main temple indicate it had a special role. Unlike the open-air enclosures, the chamber was hidden and sealed, which suggests secrecy and importance. Who could enter? What activities were reserved for those allowed inside? Every feature, from wall carvings to niches, points to thought and planning. The placement of artifacts inside, from bowls to figurines, hints at deliberate arrangements meant for rituals, reflection, or instruction. The chamber adds a deeper layer to understanding a culture that combined practicality, spirituality, and social cohesion in ways we are only starting to uncover. Astronomy appears to have influenced the builders. Certain alignments at Göbekli Tepe correspond with solstices and equinoxes, and the carvings inside the chamber interact with sunlight during these times. At specific points of the year, rays of sunlight fall on carvings or objects in niches, highlighting patterns and emphasizing their importance. This shows the builders carefully observed the sky and incorporated celestial knowledge into their architecture. For people without written language, this integration of observation, art, and architecture demonstrates remarkable abstraction and planning. Every carving and placement in the chamber seems to have purpose, showing that they understood cycles of time and used them to guide ceremonial life or encode cosmological knowledge in ways that were meaningful to the community. The social aspect of Göbekli Tepe also stands out. Building a site of this scale required cooperation, coordination, and shared cultural values. Labor would have been divided, tasks assigned, and people trained to perform specialized work. Some materials, like specific stones, may have been brought from far away, implying trade or exchange networks. These people were connected, sharing knowledge and resources to make monumental architecture possible. The discovery of the sealed chamber is especially significant because it may contain evidence of hierarchy, rituals, or practices that show how society functioned and how these humans organized themselves in ways more complex than previously assumed. Religion or spirituality seems intertwined with daily life. Repetitive motifs, animal carvings, and careful placement of artifacts suggest deep investment in sacred practices. Constructing Göbekli Tepe itself may have been an act of worship, reinforcing bonds and honoring forces beyond human control. The sealed chamber may have been the most sacred part of the site, a private space for ceremonies, initiations, or teaching spiritual knowledge. It represents an early example of organized symbolic religion, long before written records appeared. The ingenuity of the builders extends to engineering. Moving multi-ton stones, carving intricate designs, and arranging stable circular enclosures without modern tools required extraordinary skill. Marks and grooves suggest careful planning and architectural understanding. Studying Göbekli Tepe, and particularly the hidden chamber, challenges everything we thought about early humans. These hunter-gatherers were capable of monumental architecture, symbolic thought, and complex ceremonial activity long before agriculture and cities existed. The chamber provides a window into their intelligence, creativity, and vision. Every carving, artifact, and architectural choice reflects social organization, symbolic reasoning, and the human drive to create lasting meaning. By walking through the chamber, tracing the carvings, and cataloging objects, archaeologists gain insight into a civilization whose sophistication was far beyond what was previously imagined. It forces us to rethink the capabilities of humans in prehistory and the origins of culture, art, and ritual. Meanwhile, how do you think the people were able to erect such detailed monuments at that time? Let us know your views in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.